So welcome back to Trekking Through Time. This is part two of an episode that we're doing on the first paper maker in Maryland, which was William Huffman. We are in Huffmanville, Maryland, and as you can see behind me is the cemetery that we hit on the last episode. So today what we're going to do is we're going to explore the Gunpowder paper mill. Last time it was the Clipper paper mill, which was the first paper mill that William made. This time we're going to explore the mill that he built in 1781. It was called the Gunpowder paper mill, and we're going to head on down the hill. We're going to go take a look at that stuff right now. As we are actually coming down to the mill site, we're going to come around this bend and the industrial complex area is going to come into view. Don't doubt me, trust me. You're not going to believe me at first, but as soon as you see the picture, it's all going to come into perspective. So you're looking at it. This is it. You are looking at the Gunpowder paper mill site. Don't believe me? Come on. So here we are underneath of the bridge that you saw in the last scene when we were coming down the hill. We are actually on the Gunpowder River. Now I'd like to point a couple things out to you, because one thing I've learned over the years is that even though there might not be written documents, the ground will always tell you a story. So here's the story that this ground tells me. Now, you look at the stream, the river right here, and you see all these rocks. Now, it's not dissimilar to 1,000 other rivers anywhere in the world, but there's something a little different about this one, because if you look all the way up there, you'll see there are no rocks in the water whatsoever. Well, folks, back there is where the mill pond was, and there was a earthen dam that held the water back for the mill operations, which I'll show you in just a couple of minutes. But if you look at all these rocks that are in the middle of the river, these aren't just rocks. They weren't just deposited here by Mother Nature millions of years ago. No, you are looking at the remnants of the mill complex. All of these stones were the foundations to the buildings of the Gunpowder Mill, which was built here in 1781 by Wilhelm Huffman. All right, so as you go through and you're looking at everything, keep in mind Mother Nature hides things, grows over things, and really makes it quite an adventure to find anything anymore. So the adventure continues. Let me go show you that dam. All right, looking for a ooh, breakfast. Okay, now to the dam. Again, you're going to have to use your imagination, because Baltimore City did a wonderful job absolutely obliterating the site when they put the reservoir in the 1920s and 30s. But stick with me on this. If you look straight across there, there's a slight hump on the wood line. I know it's hard to see, but again, you're going to have to trust me. It is there. And what you're looking at is the other side of the earthen dam that was used to make a mill pond. And of course, the mill pond had a mill race, and that mill race had the water going down and turning the wheel at the Gunpowder paper mill, which in turn is what operated all the machinery there. And toward the end of the 19th century, they moved over to steam power, which of course, you have your boilers, you still need a dam, you still need the water. And what happened was, in the late 1880s, there was a series of floods that came through. They would knock the dams out of operation. The Huffman family would put them back into operation. But eventually, in the very late 1880s, early 1890s, this dam finally gave way. It gave way, and all the water came rushing through. And at that point in time, with more technologically superior paper mills in New England putting out a cheaper product. Also, one of the men that worked for William Huffman, his last name was Glatfelter. You may have heard that name because there was a paper factory in Spring Grove, Pennsylvania, Glatfelter, that operated for over 100 years, and he got his start right here. He learned all of his stuff from William Huffman, and then took that information, went up to Pennsylvania, started his own business, which in its own right lasted for over 100 years. But coming back here, this is where it all started. This is where the mill dam was. And if it wasn't for this big hunk of dirt that you're looking at right now, then you wouldn't have had any mill operations at all. And yeah, and that's that. All right, now we've seen the mill. Well, not the mill. We've seen the mill dam-ish, which is right over here. Now, in the 1880s, 1890s, they tried to up production. It wasn't really all that successful, but they tried to up production by bringing a railroad in. Okay, there is the Western Maryland Railroad, which is a few miles off through the woods there. So they built a spur line. And when they built the spur line, it came right through here. Now, again, you have to use your imagination. And also, again, you'd be hard pressed to believe it, but there's actually a fire trail that goes through there. You're supposed to be able to get a fire truck in there to fight a fire that may possibly happen. I think Baltimore County is a little off on their maintenance, but we'll let that slide for now. But at any rate, right through here, this little itty bitty defile in the woods is where the Rockdale Railroad came through. And as its name would imply, you would think it might go down to the Rockdale paper mill, but it never actually made it that far. More on that later. But the railroad actually came up in here, came through this area, and went down there and went right on in front of the Huffman house, which we're going to head down. I'm going to show you what's left of that, which, as you may surmise, is not a heck of a lot. But we'll come on down this way, and we're going to talk about the Huffman house and the rest of the mill operations. Okay, so like I said before, the railroad came down in front of the Huffman house. Now, there's three houses that are associated with William Huffman. You have the Clipper House, which was the original house that he built for the Clipper Mill back in the 1770s. And then you have the Huffman Mansion, which we hit on the last episode, which is up at the top of the hill in the town of Huffmanville. That was built by William Huffman's grandson, William Huffman. But the second house that he built was the Huffman House, which was adjacent to the Gunpowder paper mill. And again, imagination. See this vehicle right here? The Huffman House itself was just to the left of it, up against this embankment. And literally where this sign is, the big word no, there was the addition to the Huffman House. Now, it's summertime, it's very hot, and there's a spring that normally runs, except when it gets into a drought situation, but there's a spring that bubbles from the ground right here, right around where that sign is, maybe just a little south of the sign. Well, William Huffman built his house right over the spring. There's an addition to the left of the main house, and in that basement is the fresh spring. And he did that obviously for refrigeration purposes, drinking water purposes, whatever domestic needs you may need. It's a heck of a lot easier to go to your basement to get your water than it is to go to the well 50 feet from your house, especially at like 10 o'clock at night for whatever reason. But with that being said, the railroad literally came through right where I'm standing and passed along right in front of this car. Well, not right in front of this car. Literally, this car is sitting where the tracks are or were. But the Huffman House and addition was right here. All of the mill buildings were arrayed around through here. So you had buildings that were made they were warehouses, they were manufacturing facilities, they were livery stables for the horses that drew the wagons, which hauled the product. So this was not just like a 2 or 3 building operation. This was a big operation down in here. There's probably 15 to 20 buildings. And like I said, if you look over here, you have to use your imagination, but going off through there is a railroad bed where the Rockdale Railroad would have continued down to the Clipper Mill and on to the Rockdale paper mill. Now we're gonna whip around on the other side of these bushes, and I'm gonna give you another view of what at one point in time was part of the mill complex and the Huffman House. Aha! All right. Now, I told you, Baltimore City did one heck of a job obliterating this place when they put the reservoir in back in the 1920s and 30s. But if you look hard enough, you can find pieces of what was left here. Follow me. If you look right here, this is brick. I know it might be kind of hard to imagine that this is brick, but look, I don't know if you can focus in on that, but that right there, that's brick, okay? This is made from local clay, probably down in Baltimore, and this is a brick. Here's part of a brick. Here's part of another brick. So when you come in with a bulldozer and you bulldoze everything, it all kind of gets mixed together. So you're walking up a path on the weekend, you're walking your dog, you're out with your kids, you're just having a great time exploring nature, and you're walking literally right over history. Okay, well, can't say they found the most level place in the world to build mills, but hey, whatever works, right? All right, so my cameraman is not the most agile person in the world, not to mention the fact that this is not the easiest place to access. So I dove in for everybody, and I wanted to prove my point about having to use your imagination, but something actually having been here. So out of the abyss, I come with offerings of proof. All right, so like I said, this is where the Huffman House was. We have a brick, we have coal, and we have bits of plaster with whitewash still on it. So indeed, this is where there was a spot for a house. And you'll have to take my word for it. I do have some footage. I'll splice that in real quick. But all down there, there's rubble, there's stones, there's coal, there's bricks, there's plaster. This is the location where the Huffman House was. Okay? House, addition, mill buildings. It's amazing. Okay, so now we've taken some time. We've gone through the mill complex. I've shown you guys where the dam was. I've shown you guys where the railroad came through. I've shown you the mill house, the Huffman House itself, or at least what was left of it. And I've shown you guys the remnants of all of the foundations of the buildings for the mill complex itself. Let's change gears a little bit. Let's head on up the hill and pay our respects to the man himself. Well, it's been a long climb up the hill, but here we are. We are at the Huffman Burial Ground. This is the ancestral cemetery of the Huffman family and very close friends. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also point out that it was that era in history, and there are also trusted family servants buried in here as well, and I'm sure we all know what that's a euphemism for. Now, I'll go ahead and just read this to you, because it's a lot easier than you guys trying to squint your eyes and look at it. So, the Huffman Gunpowder Burial Ground. William Huffman, born in 1740 in Germany, arrived in Philadelphia in 1768. He married Susanna Weinbach in 1771. They moved here to Maryland in 1775 and built Clipper Paper Mill. William was the first paper maker in the state of Maryland. In 1781, he built the Gunpowder Paper Mill. The village that formed nearby was called Paper Mills. Later renamed Huffmanville, William provided a school and church for his employees, as well as his burial place. Susanna died in 1803 and William in 1811. Their children were William, Christian, Henry, Jacob, Peter, Gottlieb, and Susanna. Now, William, Christian, Henry, Jacob, Gottlieb, and Susanna, they were all involved in the mill operations, but Peter was the one that actually was the head of it and carried it on. Peter's not really all that memorable because he kept the status quo. His grandson, William, is the one that made the paper mills a real big success, and it was not for Wilhelm Huffman, but William, his grandson, that the town of Paper Mills was renamed for. Now, once again, I said we were going to come in and we were going to pay our respects to the actual man. And back in the 1980s, Hereford High School got together and they got some money and they had a new headstone made. And you take a look right here, and this is the new stone that was installed back in the 1980s. Everything that you see on these stones is an exact transcribe of the original headstone markers, which are directly behind it. So Mr. Huffman and Mrs. Huffman are actually buried right here. If you look over there, you see how it says that Wilhelm Huffman was a revolutionary patriot. Well, the reason that he was a revolutionary patriot is because during the American Revolution, he actually supplied paper to the Continental Army for making of ammunition. And if you have a real army, you have to have real documents. So he donated all of these things. And that's why he was remembered as a patriot, because not the fighting that he did for the American cause, but for the material that he contributed to the American cause of freedom. But here you go. Here's the Wilhelm Huffman burial ground. A lot of his relatives are here. Any place that you see a little stone like this, with no inscription, no writing or anything like that on it, that is generally where one of his trusted servants would have been buried. And I like to point out that in the time when segregation was the norm and the rule, I think it's very refreshing and very sentimental that a man who had slaves, indentured servants, however you want to call them, I find it a very strong point to his character that he chose in the afterlife not to be segregated from them. He was buried with them, all in the same place. So as in life, they kept themselves tight-knit in death. Just take a moment and soak that in. All right, well, as we come off of the Huffman Burial Grounds, we're going to descend down into Hemlock Gorge. And I'm going to show you guys, I'm going to tie in a little something from a short that I did last year. And then we're going to finish off with that there railroad I told you about, and we're gonna figure out exactly why it didn't go where it should have gone when it should have gone, but it didn't. Now, for those of you who have, fiddled and played around with my my YouTube stuff, you might remember a short from last year called WTH. Well, let's explore that a little more. Come here. See, last year I came up to a mound with a whole bunch of stuff sticking out of it, and I was asking the audience, what is this? Well, confession, I already knew what it was. Check this out. So, being in a valley, not having real major transportation, you had to have a way to get from one mill to another. So here you've got these threaded bolts that are coming out of this mound of stone right here. Well, there is this one here, there's another one up there, and there's several more going down this way. This is actually the base to a tower for a cable car operation. This is how they got material from one mill to the other going down through the valley. They didn't have a railroad, and there really wasn't enough room to build a proper road without going up over the hills and down and around. So what do? You go in the air. You build some towers, you string some cables, and you can take your men and material one place to the other and not have to worry about the river, the trees, the rocks, or anything like that. Pretty ingenious if you ask me, and really high tech for the 19th century. I know we're here about the history, but while we're at it, let me show you exactly why I love this place. Give me the camera. Thank you. Okay. All right. You filmed me. All right. So that was my cameraman that you just saw. Yeah, great guy, wonderful son. I love him very much. But this is why I love this area so much. You come out here and you're in the middle of the Gunpowder River. I mean, look at this. I mean, have you ever seen anything so beautiful? And the further along you get, the better it looks. I mean, just picture perfect serenity. Okay. Whew. Okay, end of the line. Literally, end of the line. Where I'm standing right now is the railroad track bed for the Rockdale Railroad, which was built in the late 1880s, early 1890s. And this is it. You see over here, there's a big rock face that comes down, and the flat bed for the tracks just stops. Well, that's because this is the end of the line. They didn't have any more money to make it go any further. By the time they put this railroad in, the mills were already losing money, and it was a downhill slide. Now, for a very brief time after the Huffman paper mills closed up, there was actually a ice manufacturing facility up here, and the railroad served them for a couple of years. But pretty much when the area was bought by Baltimore City to make Pretty Boy Reservoir as drinking water for the city of Baltimore, they got rid of all of this. They ripped up the railroad tracks. They tore down the mill. Whatever was left of the dam, they knocked it through. They tried to make it look as natural as humanly possible. And to be completely honest, I think they did a great job. Although I think it's a shame that they absolutely covered up all the history that was here. So, but listen, thanks for coming out. And remember, history is where you find it, and we're going to keep on looking. So I will see you guys next time.
Hello everybody, my name is Warren Parkhurst. I'm the cameraman and editor for channel Taste Buds Through Time, and I just wanted to film this little announcement to let you know that if you like the video you just watched, you should come over and join us on Trekking Through Time, spelled Trekking Through Time, spelled like the clock, not like the spice. I'm going to have it linked in the description below if you want to join us, but hey, if that's not your cup of tea, which, not very British of you, but if it's not, you can stay here on this channel, just keep watching our cooking, and I hope you have just as much fun. But I do highly recommend looking at the other one because we've been having a lot of fun doing it. So with that, all I can really say is history is where you find it. I hope you join us along the way.